where are we right now? What are we trying to do? I've asked you to kind of turn in your executive summaries and your prototypes, kind of we're in development of that. So I want to look at your kind of finished prototypes next week. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Or no, no, you're good. I want to take some time today with our cohorts. We don't have a guest speaker, so we're going to have a little bit more time to actually kind of work through some problem solving, and that'll happen after I kind of open up here. So I want to get you caught up on a few things. One, we have an invitation from Jesse Smith with the Richmond Tattoo Festival. Is anyone interested in going to that? All right. I'm going to turn in emails for everybody, so you should all be on the guest list. That was a very generous thing that Jesse offered last class. The other thing that's kind of an interesting development is he has actually offered us a couple of tables at the convention for products from this class. All right, so before we get too excited with that, and I think it's a really cool opportunity, I think each table is like 4 foot by 6 foot, and we would be presenting kind of as a group. But I want to, and he has to make sure that whatever we're showing is of quality to show there, right? So there's going to be a kind of a review process if anyone wants to show. That's the weekend of October 19th, I think. I have to look back at the dates, but I want to take a survey first because he's going to reserve some tables for us. Who's interested in actually tabling at the Richmond Tattoo Convention? Okay. So if you're interested, we have to get on a timeline. Obviously, getting your work turned in before that time is really important. I'd love it to be something from this class that you're actually submitting there and turning in. I don't know that it necessarily has to default to that, but really generous thing that he's done. These are paid tables that people kind of claim and use, and he's reserving a spot for us. So very, very kind on his part. So very interesting things there. Additionally, I got an email from Keith Fabry, and we're paying attention because I think they had like 15 requests for samples from paper stock and everything else. They can't fulfill all of those, but they did send me with 3 sample packets here. So if y'all are curious about paper type and print quality and everything else, I have those here. You can kind of check these out. If you really, really want to leave with one, that's fine. I don't need 3 sample packets. I'll keep one. But if you all want to kind of put your hands on these things, look at color, quality, and everything else, that's something very nice that they did as well. All right. So people are paying attention. They're seeing kind of the conversations that we're having, and they're excited to kind of help out. Okay. So a couple things there to update you on. I want to go over to the Miro boards. I did update something here, kind of some updates on case studies. And it's really nice because my case study is kind of tracking with what you all are doing as well. And sometimes my update is going to be just like, well, this is where we are with that project, that business launch, and these are some tools and resources that I'm kind of looking at, and that becomes kind of the lecture for today. So I did go through, and best practice here is to actually work through as you're starting to think about your launch and everything else. You want to make sure that you're sketching these things out. So I touched on that last class, going through that process, kind of best practice versus what my default was, which is to go right into the tools and start trying to design. How many of you have found yourself doing that as well? Exploring with different website builders and everything else, and it kind of quickly gets frustrating because it's not doing the thing that you want it to do. It's exactly where I found myself. So as I mentioned, I went back. This is my kind of design in Photoshop of what I would like to see. And now that I'm very specific about what I want from the software, it's a lot easier to start going through and saying, I can disqualify this one, I can use that one, because it gives me those tools and those functionalities that I want or not. And it's okay if it doesn't. If I find something that gets me 80% or 90% of the way there, then I can potentially code in some of the platforms and go into it and make it work the way that I want it to work. All right. So I'll share a few of those tools with you today, help you think a little bit about what your sales page or your launch platform might look like, and some tools that we can use to kind of amplify those efforts. All right. So we're kind of looking over the horizon a little bit. We're not that far away from your product launch, which is scheduled for October 31st. Right. So we're about a month and a half away from that. And if you end up going and tabling at the Richmond Tattoo Convention, then your deadline gets here faster. All right. Any questions on that stuff at all? All right. So that is there. And we were kind of looking at week 5 on the Miro board. So if we're seeing blanks here, it means that we're behind. Okay. So make sure that you're kind of updated. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Same question. No worries. But make sure that these things are updated today, so we can kind of have a look into the silo there. All right. So a few things. Just let's take another reference at the syllabus here. We are on week 5, which is crazy. We're kind of a third of the way through already, which it happens fast. So we're still looking at prototype. And then next week, I do want you to have your refined prototypes kind of delivered and ready to present. Okay. So present to me, present to your cohorts. We're not going to formally have time to do that. I've got another guest speaker coming in next week. So that will kind of take up most of the class, but that's where you should be. And then we are getting into phase 2, which is really the pitch. And that's where things start to get interesting. So your executive summary is kind of your overlay. It's your description so that you have a Word template to kind of work forward through. And I don't mean Word document as in Microsoft Word, but an actual Word document to work from. Understand that when you're working professionally, the vast majority of the time, you're given a brief. You're given some type of written description. This is the project. We've given it structure, and it's your job as visual communicators to go out and actually give it a body. You actually give it a structural visual form, and that's oftentimes our deliverable. It's kind of what we're taking to market. But if you are the author of a project, it doesn't really end there, right? You now have to go into the back end and start thinking about marketing, branding, advertising, generating up some type of interest in the thing that you're making. All right. So that's a huge difference in working on commission and working for somebody and launching something yourselves. When we're working for somebody, we're not involved in that part of it, which is the promotion, the marketing usually, right? Our work kind of help carry that message forward, but that's actually not what we're doing. When you author something, you're carrying that burden all the way through. You have an idea, you write the script, you design the brief, you think about who you're speaking to, you put together the product or the service, or at least some approximation of it, and you have to get that thing out to people, which is a huge lift on the other end, right? If you've ever had some type of a home improvement project, you know that part of it is doing the work, and a big part of it is the cleanup, right? You have to do the back end of it as well. And quick raise of hands, has anybody launched a social media kind of crowdfunding project at this point? Okay. So there is a huge amount of effort that goes into this. What am I making? I have to make the videos. I have to think about the sales page. I have to think about the actual cost and do my due diligence and my research on that. But then you get to the campaign, and let's say that your campaign is 30 days long, which is quite long. You have to talk about you for 30 days. It's not really fun, right? So look how great this thing is. I'd love for your support. Look what we're doing. This is what you get. And you have to kind of build a campaign to do that in an artful way. So I think that's the hardest part of it, right? Really, that launch day is probably the hardest thing, which is you've put in a tremendous amount of work. You've done your research. You've built everything out on the front end. And then you're kind of facing that question, like, is it ready? Is it good enough? Are people going to like it? And then you have to hit that launch button. That's actually the hardest thing for me. And then once you do that, it's like, okay, now you got to hustle. And you actually have to make sure that your messaging connects with people who might be interested in the thing that you're making. All right. So if you're interested in business, understand that that's a huge part of it. And as your business grows, one of the things that's very interesting about that, if you're bootstrapping, bless you, if you're bootstrapping, which is you're really doing this by yourself or in a small group of people with the limited resources that you don't have external funding, this is how you generate that. And you're doing all of these jobs by yourself, and you're wearing a lot of different hats, okay? If your business scales and you have revenue, you have investors, you have things coming in, you can hire people to do the things that you don't want to do, right? And recognizing the things that you're bad at and the things that you're good at, what better way to learn than bootstrapping? Like, wow, I really hate sales. I really hate that part of it. I'm not good at it, right? Maybe that's the first thing you replace when you have enough revenue to do that, okay? So even going through the exercise of launching something on your own, if your intention down the road is not to do that, you're still learning a tremendous amount about the process, okay? So we'll get into the pitch next week, and we'll start talking about what that looks like and how we take the script that is your executive summary and we start to give it that body, right? This is where we start to make things look sexy. That's what a big part of what we do is like we deliver something and say, isn't this interesting? Isn't this cool? Right? And I will lower the bar of expectations for you. That's my goal. It's like, wow, what does a pitch look like? Right? What does a professional pitch look like? And I told you last time that I've seen some abysmal looking pitches that have generated billions of dollars. So that should give you hope, right? With your design skills and your capacity for communication, you can put together something that looks really good, right? And sometimes the things that you're making, we don't want them to look super polished, right? Have you ever seen a campaign before that someone's put together that's almost too polished? It's too professional? I know that sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes the things that we're making, access to you as an individual, you as a storyteller, and that kind of grassroots look and feel is exactly what you want, right? So our messaging and the way that we put it together really varies depending on who we're speaking to and the type of thing that we're making. All right. So that's where we are with everything. Any questions with the structure of the class and kind of how we're moving forward from there? All right. So I want to walk you through a few things, and this is kind of not ego day, but I want to share a couple things here. So outside of being a professor, I do a lot of different things. I've really kind of, I guess, made my name in the industry as an illustrator and a designer. And this is kind of how my portfolio website looks right now. So a lot of you are going to end up going this direction. You want to be an independent contractor, you want to be a freelancer. We have a lot of people who want to go into some type of commercial application of design and illustration. So your website might look something like this. This is a portfolio website. There is an anatomy to the websites that I suggest that you think about. And the first is that you want to develop something as a freelancer that is a static component to your website. All right. By static, I mean that it's not going to be updated very frequently, and it's going to kind of live there as the best example of your work. My website is super static. I haven't changed it in a long time, and it's much overdue for an update. But this is kind of how it looks right now. This is my landing page. And if you've heard that term, a landing page can take a lot of different forms, but this is my landing page. Why? I want to show context and application as soon as somebody comes to my site, right? Nobody randomly is coming to your website, by the way, right? When we surf, we're surfing social media, we're looking at different things. You might do a search. Something might come up in a Google search, but that's not usually how we get introduced to things these days. So when someone comes to your site, they already know your address. They know your website address, your domain, right? So they found their way to you because probably you put something out into the world. They're like, that looks interesting. Let me check it out, right? That's usually the way that we're found these days. Okay. So I don't think that you have to go to a great deal of effort with a block of text to describe to people who you are on your landing page. We already know that pictures speak louder than words, right? So let's use our pictures to very quickly give a survey into what we do and what we're trying to offer as a service or a product. Does that make sense? So this is kind of a salon style where you go in, there's a lot of different things here. I hope that when you see my website, you start to see things in here like, oh, there's text and there's pictures. There's things that might look like what? Entertainment, movie posters. That's the type of work that I do. That's the type of work that I want to get. Okay. So I have some concept work on here. I have some entertainment and movie art, but there's a lot of things with typography. I do a lot of hand-done typography. That helps contextualize things very quickly, right? The first thing you might see on here is like, oh, there's a book. Maybe he wrote a book. I wrote a book, right? So those types of things are called mock-ups, and we can use mock-ups to instantly communicate the things that we're making, right? Type, pictures, words, functionality. So if you go to somebody's site and it's just images and there is no descriptor in there as to what the images do, we're assessing the images based off of their quality. Do we like it or not? Not off of their function. So I will tell you that as artists who are going out into some type of marketplace, that is the number one mistake that you're going to make with your portfolio. Oftentimes you're not there to share it. You send it out to people, they see a PDF, they find it somewhere, and they see images, and you're allowing them to quickly dismiss the things that you make based off of just aesthetic. And I know that we want to make things look interesting, but when we are talking about applied artwork, it has a function. It's solving a problem. It's not just storytelling. Does that make sense? All right. You might nod yes, and some of you might still not understand, but Anytime a student comes to me, whether it's in the professional sphere or working as a professor, and they show me their portfolio, if I see just a bank of images and I don't know their application, that's the first thing I'm going to have them make an adjustment on. All right. Then if your portfolio is loaded up with figure drawings, that's also a mistake. Right? What does a figure drawing say to somebody immediately? You're probably a student and you're not solving a problem. What might it say? Well, it might say that you draw really well. Well, that's the ticket for entry into what we do, right? Everybody draws really well. Okay. I shouldn't say everybody because I can show you commercial examples of people who don't draw well and they've done something with it. So what do you say in those situations? Like, well, I'm jealous. I want those awards. I want those opportunities. That person has figured out something about marketing that you might not know. That person has figured out something about storytelling that you might not know, right? Or maybe you should kind of challenge the assumptions with what's good, what's not, what's personal, what's distinct, and what's novel. Yes. Yes. So just for recording, the question was showing your work in context is basically showing the application, the function of it, right? So imagine like if we flipped it around and we said, how do projects come into you? Remember last week we talked about I think it was last week, maybe the week before, the anatomy of a problem. And we get things like time, industry, space, audience, and content. When you get a job, if this is a paying opportunity for a commission, it always comes that way. Here's basically the brief. And the brief is a summary or an explanation. It can be called different things, but we'll call it the brief. This is the brief description of what the project is and the parameters. And it's interesting. I'm working on a project right now, and I keep telling the people who hired me, I was like, put me into a box. Tell me what my limits are. That actually drives my creativity. And for a lot of people, that drives creativity, right? To give you an example of what I mean by that, you've got 2 hours and you're super inspired. You want to paint. You go into your studio and you start painting. You don't have a plan. You don't have sketches. What happens? Stream of consciousness. You probably walk away with it's like, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't like it. I didn't make progress. I kind of wasted 2 hours. That's how I feel if I paint without intention. If I'm painting for a show, like a gallery show, I've already written my artist statement. I've done my sketches. I have a plan as to what I want to paint. So I have a box that I've put myself in as a fine artist, as a painter. As an illustrator and designer, other people are creating the box and the dimensions, and they say, here are the parameters, here's who we're speaking to, here's the story. And I refer to these as external narratives, right? So if you're a painter or you're authoring an autobiographical comic, you're the author. And that is usually an internal narrative. It's your story. You know it very well. When you start working commercially for other people or with other people, it's almost always an external narrative. It's someone else's story, whether it's fiction or it's fact. They're sending you information that's like, okay, we need to communicate this, and you are the best person based off of your portfolio to communicate this, and we're confident that you can do it because you've done it before. You've established a precedence. Does that make sense? Great. So I've never worked on a commission. I shouldn't say never. There's never, never. 95% of the time, 99% of the time, there's a need for the work. And someone saying, this is the application, here's the budget, here's the parameters. And within that, you have to do something creative. So anyone who's working for animation and film, did you have a question over here? Animation, film, anything that has a commercial outlet, there is some component of limitations that you're working within. And I truly believe that there's a lot of beneficial things to that helps drive our creativity, right? They say that necessity is the mother of invention, right? So when you need something, you figure out ways to solve it. All right, great question. Any other questions with that at all? So, so there's a number of ways to do that. One, again, showing something as a mock-up, which is this is a mock-up. This book doesn't exist yet, right? But you can see from that the function is implied, right? So if you have a poster You know, it's hard to show a poster. You can show it framed. Sometimes you'll see people selling posters and the hands will be in the picture. Why do they do that? It's a real thing. It's not just a picture. It's an artifact. You all are on social media. You're seeing a ton of things on drawing demonstrations on Procreate, things like that. You ever see someone's hand on the screen on Procreate and they're drawing, they're recording that? Why are they doing that? Because you can output the image itself or the video of the making of without the hand in there. Why is their hand on the screen? They want to show you that a human made this. This didn't just blink into existence. It wasn't a word prompt. This is something that somebody made. So there's a lot of things with context that we can imply in how we present, right? If you have a painting and you're a gallery artist and you actually go to a space and you hang your painting on the wall in a frame and it's got cast shadows and lighting on it, that implies that it's an artifact, right? So I get into a whole thing with artifact versus image, okay? In the world of commercial illustration and design, we are in the business of the image, okay? So it's digitized, it's printed, and it's removed from its original source, right? That's completely different than the application for a painter who's in the business of the artifact, the thing itself, right? You ever been to a show before where you go and it's all digital art and it's all digital prints? Like, to me, it kind of leaves me empty. It might look cool as an image, but there's no surface to it. There's no depth to it. Now you go to a museum, what are you doing? You're looking at sculptures. You see them in the round, 360 degrees. You see a painting and you see layers of paint. And I don't know about you all, but if I can go look at a Van Gogh painting and look at layers, I'm looking at the side of the painting like, oh, how did he do that? There's so much about the process that's implied in the artifact. So as illustrators and designers, we can kind of play in the realm of both. If you paint traditionally and then you scan things and you digitize them, you have the artifact and the image, both, and you can profit off of both. You can sell both. You can own both, whatever you want to do. But there's a really stark difference between the work that we would do as a painter and the work that we would do as an illustrator, right? So I hope that answers your question a little bit. You said, how do you do this? You start building in how the function of how the piece functions with how you show it and display it. So if I asked you that second image on the left up there, what is that? It's a movie poster, right? It's a really well-known movie from the 50s, I think, called Meshes of the Afternoon. And that was, I don't know if I've got this one. So this is another layer in how you can do this. So let's say that it looks like a movie poster. I like this type of feature for a portfolio because you can click on it and then get what? More information. You're going down the rabbit hole. Oh, there's the client. Literally the brief that I worked with. So that's the description. This is the type of thing, to answer your question. This is the type of information I would get for an assignment. You know, this is how we're going to print it. This is how we're going to make it. This is the overall concept. Not the concept. The concept's on me. And you can kind of see that this is the process. Why am I showing this? Again, this is my hand in it. This is a Procreate file. And I'm sketching, kind of going through what the process looks like. And these are sketches I would submit to the client. This is a case study for me. And what I'm saying by this, if someone wants to work with me, I can send them this link and say, hey, this is how I work. This is what it would be like to work with me. It's a collaborative process. I get the brief. I send you back sketches. We have a dialogue about what's working and what isn't. You come back. So it is always a collaboration with these types of commissions. Okay? Context. This is a physical print. Why am I showing this? Well, we made screen prints of it. Okay, so I put it in a frame, put it on the wall. I think this is actually, yeah, this is not a mock-up. So a mock-up is a kind of an artificial approximation. This is hung up in my studio in my house on the wall. It was going out to a show. All right, but do all these things kind of cement what the function is? It goes beyond just being a movie poster, but it's actually a screen print, which we're selling, right? So those types of things contextually can help. And that layer of that rabbit hole where you can kind of go into a project on your website is a great place to display that, right? If your portfolio is there and you don't have a website that someone's looking at, so you have a physical portfolio that someone's reviewing, let's say that's printed, you can show these things as layouts in your portfolio as well. Okay. And even this, like I'm trying to show again through photography that it's an artifact. So I'm using depth of field. I'm kind of getting down with the angles of the photography. And what's really interesting about this particular print is the uh, the guy I was working with is like in this movie, this is essentially death that's kind of hovering over this figure. And he said, wouldn't it be cool if like in the movie, death has a mirrored face. It's actually a flat mirror. So we could use a printing process where we print on mirrored paper to kind of amplify that. I was like, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to look. They did it and I loved it. So essentially, the piece of paper, the support, was a shiny piece of reflective material, and all of the ink got printed on top of it, and all that was left was that little window. So just a really great art direction on it as well. But I'm trying to show that in the photography. Okay, so there's intention to all of this, right? And this was the other ideation process there. I wish I'd recorded my hand drawing it. I think it would have been more effective, right? Anyways, does that make sense to answer your question, Sophie? Great. All right. So I want to talk to you a little bit about why, I mean, I hopefully I've shared why I like this particular format for illustrators and designers. When I was working as a painter, my website looked a lot different. And let me get back to my website looked like that. Okay. Why it's not a salon style. Why would I show it like that? Right. Well, it's a big ass painting. I want my screen to show contextually that I'm working with surface and texture and everything else, right? So I was able to kind of change the format and everything with it, but it just looked different. The function was different. The application was different. And I think I've got some detail shots. The one that's the most effective, I think some of these are more effective for a painting. Again, depth of field with a camera to show that it's got dimension and texture to it, right? So artifact versus the image. So as you get into your things that you're making, maybe you're making an icon or a totem, you're making something that's an individual artifact, show it in function, show it in application, show it in photography. If what you're selling is a digital print, that's all you need to show is the image itself because the function is different. Make sense? All right. So a couple things here. I've used every type of website builder that you can imagine. I've hired my uncle. I shouldn't say hired. My uncle was kind enough to build my website when I was starting out. I've built my own. I've coded my own. I've hired people to build them. I've used Squarespace. I've used Adobe Portfolio. I've used WordPress. I'm using Spotify now. I've used so many different things, and I still use Adobe Portfolio, which used to be Behance. And the reason I like it, and there are other site builders that are great too. I think Squarespace is really awesome if you don't want to do as much heavy lift and you want to go in with nice templates. But what's really cool about this is before Adobe came along, and you can hold your opinions on that, this was Behance Pro Site. And Behance was social media for artists. So if you don't know Behance, I still really like it. It's away from all the other noise of everything going on. It's just art. And there's artists, there's art directors, there's photographers and everything else there, just like any other social media platform. But it's like when I talk to you about going where they gather, it's a place where people who appreciate art gather. Okay, so just like any other platform for social media, you can post your work, you can get likes, you can get comments and all of that. They do have real people who are curating the projects. So they can pick you up and say, we really like what you've done, and we're going to put this on our main page. So you go kind of into the algorithm. There's humans who are actually curating that process, and we'll put you at the top of the algorithm, essentially, which is nice, right? And they'll tell you, like, this is what we're looking for. Does Instagram do that? No. Right? Does Facebook or TikTok do that? No. They don't tell you what the algorithm is. So these are people saying, we like projects that are well formed. It's not just one image. You have description, you have process, you show all these other things that I'm kind of talking to you all about. That gives you a really good opportunity to kind of get featured if the work is of quality. Isn't that nice to know? Right? We don't have to invent this stuff. So these are little badges they give you if you get featured. And when you do, your visibility goes up, 100-fold, which is really nice. Why else do I like this? Well, you'll see on here that all the projects that are on my homepage are also over here. So if this is Babette's Feast, it's another film poster I did here. Same thing. I've got my description, got the setup for it, process. And as soon as you publish it to social media, you can go back to this section and it will pop up in your dialog as a tab. Okay, so there's the project right here. And if I want to turn it off, it's off my website. Okay, I mean, I have to update it, but it's back on my website. So social media, direct post to my website, that makes things very nice for me. So a lot of visibility you can kind of bring in, and it's very helpful. So there's other things that you can do with this as well. You can password protect sections. So I have a sandbox, as I call it here. And this is kind of client facing. So if I have a client that I want to show them certain things that are I can't put in my main portfolio because they're NDA, they're private, I can create a password and give a space for that. I've got a contact page. So let me go back to structure because I've shown you a lot of tools all of a sudden. Remember, a static website is something that's really important for your portfolios. Okay. Things that you update when your best work comes through. So a question for you, how many pieces of artwork do you think that you need to enter into professional markets? How many pieces in your portfolio? 20, 50 to 100, 5? All right. So the correct answer is somewhere in there. You need 10. Okay. And I'm giving you a very hard metric. And why is that? It's like, well, 12 is kind of that sweet spot. And 10 is enough, but it's a little bit light, right? But also, I want you to understand, like, that's not an impossible number. It's 100 would be a lot, right? It'd be overwhelming. Um, and for each of you to kind of come out of school with targets like that, it's like I don't know that I could make it through that. It'd be very daunting, right? But if you've got 10, that's a very approachable number, and it's true and accurate to portfolios I review and things that other people see. Can you have more than that? Yes. I've gone into certain meetings. So if I'm meeting with somebody who's in the magazine business and I've got 10 pieces, what's the most important thing about those pieces? There's several metrics that you're trying to hit. What are they? If you want to work with them. Number one is what? It's got to be good. Okay, it's got to look good, and you have to communicate ideas and solve problems. Right, so we can even say those are two things. What's the other thing that most of you are going to be struggling with beyond the skill set and the messaging? What's the next thing? Anyway, you hit it out of the park. Consistency, right? And on the kind of the low end, we would say that that is your style, right? A lot of emphasis gets put on style. It's the techniques we use. It's the materials. It's the way that you draw. I'm encouraging you to start thinking about your voice, right? Voice is kind of this higher level of explanation, and it's like all of the components that go into making your artwork: the storytelling, the color, the palette, the way that you draw, certainly the technique and the style. Those are all legs in this table of voice, and the voice is the big kind of overarching concept. But we know that finding your voice as an artist is going to take what? A lot of time and a lot of effort. And you might need to produce 100 portfolio pieces to get to 10, right? You might get there in 50. It might take you several years. But that consistency in what you're marketing and what you're selling gives confidence to the art director on the other side that you'll deliver what they're expecting to see from your portfolio, right? So if this sounds a little bit like our trademark conversation, right? We're giving confidence to the consumer that they know what they're getting. These ideas aren't disconnected. These are things that relate to each other. So your brand standard, your that's the wrong word here. Your individuality in the things that you make, that someone sees and like, oh, I know that artist. I don't even have to read their name. That's their voice. right? And I want you to aspire to that as artists, to find that individual thing that you're doing. Okay. But know that it's hard and it will take a lot of time and a lot of effort. All right. So consistency with work is kind of this idea that you'll set up the art director that you're working with, or the person you're working with on the other side, with confidence that you can deliver on the project they have, because they're under pressure too. They're under tremendous pressure, right? So when we talk about kind of relating to the people that you want to work with or that you want to speak to, that empathy that you need to have is like, what does an art director look like these days, right? Any guesses? Like, and I don't mean to dwell on um, magazines, but I kind of cut my teeth in magazines and then books and getting into entertainment. But let's say just in general, how old do you think an art director might be on a major project like a magazine or a video game company or something like that? Any guesses? But as far as the age, like age range, just creative industries, how old do you think art directors are? People that you might want to work with. What's that? 40, 50? So I, yeah, it depends on the market, right? So I would say in entertainment industries, you're going to get people who need to be well versed. They've kind of worked their way through as concept artists. Maybe they've gone up and they've had a lot of experience. And art director, like knowing that role, they're overseeing the vision of the project. They're overseeing a team of different people. So there's a leadership component to that as well. It's interesting. A lot of the art directors in the editorial side of things are mid 20s, 30s, in that age range. So not that different than you. And you might say, well, how does that work? Well, I found that editors tend to stick around a lot longer than art directors do. Art directors kind of go from place to place. Editorial isn't as robust as it used to be. Magazines aren't, right? So people go there and they get a job. They come in maybe as a junior art director or a deputy art director. And when that art director who goes to a different place leaves, who do they hire? They hire the deputy art director. And then the intern fulfills that position. So I'm saying that just so that you can understand that oftentimes you're dealing with people that aren't that dissimilar to you, that are not that far out of art school, and they're trying to leave their own mark and do their own thing. They're under tremendous pressure to make their deadlines, right? To do it under budget. And if you are somebody who comes into that equation and you can help take that stress away because you're consistent, you're professional, you deliver things on time, and they know what to expect, that's the type of person they want to work with again, and especially if you have your own voice and distinction, because they want to leave their own mark too. Does that make sense? You had a question up here. I didn't mean to. Not if you consistently do that, right? I mean, I could name a ton of different mixed media artists. So the question was, what happens if you're a mixed media artist? Does that affect your consistency, right? The through line for you might be the way that you solve problems, the way you think, the way you ideate, all those things together. Kind of repeating myself with those. The way you draw could be your color palette, and ultimately whether you do things digitally or use some type of collage or wax or whatever, people don't care, right? You are the filter that everything is kind of running through, and the decisions that you make, you have to think about, how do we arrive at style, at voice, and all these other things. I would define style as developing preferences through your working process, right? So you try things and you're like, I hate that. You're probably not going to pick that up again, right? But I really like the way that I did this. The more that you produce work, the more you find those preferences of things that you repeat. That's your style. So there's not many shortcuts to get to style other than failing a lot and defining kind of what you think that you're really good at and amplifying kind of those ideas, right? So media doesn't matter. I use literally everything you can imagine, from wax to tar to plaster to wire and acrylics and all the traditional stuff. My favorite place to go shopping for materials is the hardware store, right? So yeah, I don't think that makes a difference. Um, all right. So let me touch on a few other things here. Static component, website, portfolio. We get into a dynamic component. What does that look like? Dynamic is something that you want to change with more frequency, right? So if someone comes to your site that first time, like, hey, this is really cool, but you don't change things, they have no incentive to come back. Okay. So the first thing that I would encourage that you do is go ahead and set up your email capture, your email list. So someone comes to your site and says, okay, I want to be updated when you change something. I'll share how powerful those tools can be here in a moment. But the dynamic component, what are some things that you all can think of that you can give people that you can change with relative ease? Like it's easier than creating a new portfolio piece, which can take a long time. What's something that you can update easier? What's something that can be more dynamic that could live on your website to bring people back? What keeps you coming back to people's websites? What's that? Limited edition. Okay, so just kind of things that turn over pretty quickly. So you can bring your social media feeds into it. That's another option. Yeah. What else? Blogs are great. That's my favorite. Yeah. Also your store, right? Your store can also be dynamic. So if you're selling things, you can turn things over. What's really cool is when you make a picture, and this is the image part of it, not the artifact part, and you turn it into an artifact by saying, I'm going to take that image and put it on a t-shirt or a hat or prints or whatever it is. That's a scalable drawing and illustration that can now be applied to a lot of different things, right? So now we're taking one image that maybe your favorite thing that you've ever made, and we're finding all these different outlets for it. Each one of those is a potential thing that goes in your store. And it's an update, and those things are really easy. I'll show you how to do that stuff here in a moment. So all that said, static and dynamic, and then there's got to be some type of how do I get in touch with you? Who are you? I want to find out more. Think about that rabbit hole of, okay, now that I've seen the work, I want to see the person behind it. A lot of you follow people because you relate to them, right? You see yourselves in them. I asked you to go out and do some industry research. The first thing I said is find somebody that's living a life like you want to live, and they're making a living with their work, right? So that type of connection we dig into because we like the things that we see and we connect to them. All right. So that is kind of what this contact page is. And again, my website's got to be updated, but I've got kind of I should actually have this on the about page. All that stuff can kind of live there. Like, what's your mission statement? What's your artist statement? Those things can be different things. What's your bio? And how do I get in touch with you? What are the things that you've done? We get into ideas of your history and your precedents. What have you done? Right? I've worked for Disney. I've worked for this person. I've worked for that person. Those are things that level you up and are proof that you are a professional. You're not going to have those things in the beginning, but as you get them, you start to kind of collect them, right? And they start to raise your star a little bit. So any questions on that? So three major things: your static portfolio, your dynamic content, like what are you sharing, what are you updating. I've got a Q&A over here that I will eventually, I'm completely rebuilding my site because I'm not working in this market super intentionally anymore. I'm going into a different direction. But that type of thing can be connected out to your blog, or it can be your store or whatever else you want. And this is kind of the tools that I use to kind of build that. So my store looks similar to my website. This is not part of my site builder. This is not part of Adobe, right? This is Big Cartel. I like Big Cartel. It's easy to use. They have a free plan that's up to 5 products and 1 photograph of every product. And I think I pay $10 a month for 25 products, 5 images of each one. But just like the thing I showed you, like, oh, that's an interesting image on the site. Here it is in context. Here's the pricing on it. And that gives me my storefront for people to actually purchase it. Okay. So I find that my store updates a lot more frequently than my portfolio does. Make sense? All right. The back end of Big Cartel, I've got it here. These are products I've not launched, but it's nice. There's a way to kind of track orders and everything else. I don't want to click on that right now because I've got people's names and information on it that I don't want to share. But it does let you know, okay, I've sent these out. I haven't sent these out. I send everything out through media mail, U.S. Postal Service. If it's in the United States, that's the cheapest way to do it. And you're talking about a pretty inexpensive shipping cost that's fairly predictable. And I can get the tracking number from the U.S. Postal Service. I put my tracking number into the email. This particular site sends the email to my collector, my client, whoever, whatever you want to call them. They can track the package kind of going to their house. So it's very nice. I like the way that it works together. Um, any questions on those tools at all? Does that make sense so far? It's a great question. So I ship these myself right now. The business that my brother and I are building, that's one of the conversations we're having with the people we're working with. They do fulfillment, meaning that well, there's two different vendors. One is Triple Stamp and one is Keith Faber. So Keith Faber is the people I've already mentioned. They do fulfillment. As soon as he said that, Jimmy, who owns it, he got my attention. It was like, you do what? That means I don't have to warehouse prints. That means I don't have to warehouse packaging materials or purchase those things ahead of time. Those are built into the actual pricing platform that they have. So if you go on their site and you order a print, that actually anything over $65 includes free shipping. If it's been below $65, I think he said it's $12.99 for shipping. They don't ship out of the US, but that gives me a real clear idea of how to budget for things. And I'm super excited because I don't want to keep, one, I don't want to pay up front for 200 prints, right? That's an expensive proposition. That might be $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. And I don't want to do that. We'll talk about that in a moment. But that's one really attractive thing about that type of printing, where they can essentially print on demand. Because they're local, I can have quality assurance. That's huge, right? So there's places like Imprint that are supposed to be really good, but I think I want to say they're based in Michigan. I could be wrong on that. A lot of artists use them. They send out G clays from there, but the G clay does not go through the artist. It goes directly from the vendor. The same opportunity is available down here, but I can literally go down and say, hey, I'd like to see those prints before you ship them. And that's a really important thing. Does that make sense? So a few things there for you to think about as well. All right, so that is Big Cartel. That is Adobe Portfolio. And all I'm saying is that that's what I use, and that's why I use them, right? I'm looking at different solutions at this point. Okay, so something else that I really like is Substack. So we're talking about a different kind of dynamic component and things that you can kind of plug into your website. Substack is social media meets newsletter, right? And when I say newsletter, it's a really fancy way of saying emails. Like you have an email list, and with some frequency or not, you can send out your newsletter that updates people on whatever you want. It can be long form story content. It can be videos, it can be images, it can be updates to your store, news and announcement, right? So don't make it anything more than it has to be. But there's some really fantastic newsletters out there that are very helpful for people. And those are the types of things that I subscribe to. So this is my Substack, and it's got all the things that you would expect. It has analytics. It has ways of separating paid content and free content, right? It lets you embed things. I can distribute to YouTube from here. And for all of our conversations about AI is in all these software these days, so it can actually splice up your videos for you and create clips, right? Publish those as well into shorts and reels. You can do so many things from Substack. The user interface is fantastic. It's really clean and simple, and I like it a lot. So some of you might decide that your primary website could be something like Substack. You can have a landing page, and there's limited options on how you design it, but the interface is really nice. It has an algorithm, it has an audience built into it, and you can kind of take notes and say, hey, I've got a new story posted, all those things that you would expect from social media accounts, but it's got the added functionality that you're going directly into people's inbox. So it's got the social media piece, but also when I send things out, it's going straight into my subscribers' email inbox, which is, I can't overstate how important that is, connecting people that way. All right. So what I've built with my Substack is, and I've got to get it back up to speed here, but my thinking is this. I've got a lot of things that I give away for free. It's articles. It's like the finished product, right? So videos and stories and everything else. And on the paywall, I try to share as much as possible the how-to. Like what is the process behind how things are made? So everybody's got a different way of doing it, but I think that's the value that I can kind of add that goes deeper into like why would somebody pay any money for a newsletter. It's like, well, hopefully you're able to kind of give them things that have value to who your audience is. Does that make sense? So my plan is to try to consolidate all of my mailing lists into one, because I have 4 or 5 at this point. I've got one from Kickstarter. I've got one from Gumroad. I've got several from my own websites and different entities. So I've got thousands of subscribers in different places. And each one of those is its own email kind of newsletter. So that's not super efficient, right? I will probably consolidate them all into Substack because I like it so much. So that is an endorsement for Substack. Just I really like it. Any questions on that at all? Yes. Sure. They've got their own list and everything else. So here's something really interesting about Patreon. Okay. Patreon, Kickstarter, Gumroad. I kind of use those three as just reference points here. But what is Kickstarter? Let me start with Kickstarter, right? What is that? What do we use it for? Crowdfunding. Okay. So crowdfunding to a very specific end, right? We're going to crowdfund to generate revenue for one project, right? Chris Irving taught here. He would do Kickstarter campaigns. They were all crowdfunding. Everything was one project, and it kind of lives and it dies, right? So I love Kickstarter. I think it's a really great idea. All it is a pitch deck that connects with people. Like you're putting together an entire proposal to say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I could make this thing, and here's what you would get out of it, right? When we talk about pitches, that's a pitch, and you have to go through the format. So I like it for that. It's great. But if you don't have an audience, then you're relying on their audience. And it's back to social media and back to noise, right? So how do you build your audience? Well, that's where your emails come in, right? Patreon is really fantastic for showing process. I don't know if this is true or not, so I want to qualify this, but I'm willing to bet that someone said, hey, that Kickstarter platform's pretty amazing, but the biggest frustration is what? Well, the projects live and die. They don't continue. What if we could find a way for creators to get paid for the making of, not just the thing? So they took the creative process and they exploded it. And if you go into Patreon, there's tons of stuff. Hey, I'm making this thing. I'm creating a comic every month. I'm making sketches for this. I'm doing things for whatever. Like it's an ongoing process, a patronage, hence the name, right? And you're paying a certain amount of money as a subscription model for those updates, right? So what if we didn't treat these things like Patreon versus Kickstarter versus Gumroad, but we said they're all part of the same pipeline? And you build your audience in Patreon, where you have an ongoing thing. So let's say you make a comic. If you become a subscriber, a paid subscriber here, I will update my comic once every month. You'll see the panel. You'll have insight and feedback on the things that I'm writing, and you can be part of the process. You build your list. You make your comic. You take a couple of years to do it. You have a couple thousand people following you. What do you do with that? Hey, subscribers, I've decided to launch a Kickstarter campaign to publish the comic book that you've been following, that you've been supporting. That's where you build your list over time. So now you're getting paid for the process and paid for the thing that you're making. And you make it, where does it live at the end, right? So let's say that you get funded in Kickstarter and you make enough money to print the thing. So I literally did this, right? My sketchbook, I made enough money to print the thing and get it shipped. I didn't have to pay any money out of pocket, and everybody got their books, and I ended up with an extra 1,000 books. Okay. So that covered the front half, and the back half was the extra 1,000. I'm charging $25 for each sketchbook. If I sold every one, which I'm not going to, my potential profit is $25,000 because all my overhead has been covered through the Kickstarter campaign. Does that make sense? So now what do you do with those things? Well, you take your books and you put them on your store, or you put them on places like Gumroad. So that's your warehouse. So if you think about this as a full cycle, Patreon, Kickstarter, Gumroad, or Patreon, Kickstarter, website, what do? Well, you go back and you repeat it. Hey, I'm starting my next comic, and your list grows. Does that make sense? It's a cyclical process, not an end with one of them. So I like thinking about it that way. And yeah, Patreon, I think there's some really cool things coming out of Patreon for sure. All right. And all of those platforms, by the way, Kickstarter, Patreon, Gumroad, they all have their own means of capturing emails. So you'll build subscriber lists. And I know Kickstarter and Gumroad both let you export CSV files. That's basically your email lists. And you can import those CSV files into other places. Now, important caveat, people need to opt in to your email list. They have to choose to kind of opt in. And you can default and you kind of I don't know the legal parameters here, but you might be able to say something like, hey, I'm consolidating my list over here. You can opt out, let me know. But you always give people a way of opting out of things. But I think with mailing lists in particular, there's a legal ramification. People have to opt into that. Okay. All right. So those are some tools that kind of, I think, function really well together. Um, I don't know if this is going to play ball here or not, but let me try one more thing. Because your email subscriber tool is, in my opinion, your most powerful tool that you have. So yes, your website is important because that shows your wares, it shows the things that you do, and that's where things can live. Let me try this again. I'm trying to get my passwords to pop up, which did happen last time. Let me do one more thing here. Well, I'll just describe it to you, and then I'll hopefully get some screen grabs and be able to share it. One thing that's really interesting about MailChimp, and there's another one called Kit. Kit used to be Constant Contact, is and there's other providers as well, but they give you really robust tools on the back end. So let's say that this is the tool that you're using to capture your emails. I've got that form on my website where you can go and say, let's about newsletter. This form is linked to my email list right now. Look at the web address. It doesn't live on my website. This is actually something that lives on MailChimp. So when you click on it, it kind of takes you as a flyaway, but you can design that. And I'm just kind of tell people that this is what you get if you sign up for my email list. And that list continues to grow. It's very passive in that regard. So I see the list growing, which is great. You can build that website email capture over in MailChimp. So that's where you have it, and that's where the list lives. I think it's free for up to 1,000 subscribers, and I've gone well past that, so it's getting kind of expensive, and I'm looking at alternatives right now. But for you when you're starting out, it's a great place to build your site. When you send out an email, you can see how many people have opened it. You can see if they've clicked on images and links, right? So you can see kind of what's popular and the things that you're sharing. Isn't that good data to know? You're not just sending things out into the ether. You're actually able to say, oh, there's information coming back, and 10% of the people open up this email and 60% of the people open up that other email. What's the difference? Well, you can look at your headlines, right? That might be the problem. You can look at your time of day when you sent it. MailChimp and Kit both, they have the ability to kind of tell the software to send out your emails at the time where they're most likely to be opened up. So if I send out an email campaign on a Monday and I want it to hit everybody at 9 a.m., well, we have 9 a.m. on the East Coast and we have 9 a.m. on the West Coast, and they're different times. The software can actually split that up so that everybody's getting it at 9 a.m. wherever they are. That's interesting too. You also have schedulers, and you can say, well, I want to set up my newsletter for the next 6 months. You build your template, you have your headline, your logo, and everything else, and then you kind of have your information. If you took your portfolio and you just took those 10 pieces we talked about, you built a newsletter, and you featured one piece for every email that goes out, and you sent those out to an email list at 9 a.m. every Monday for a month, you have 10 months worth of content to send out that would take you 30 minutes to put together. Don't you look professional? Right? Now you're consistent, you're delivering things on time, and you're kind of hitting those marks. Does that make sense? So really interesting things with those email builders. Where am I right now? Well, as I said, I'm trying to consolidate lists. I'm trying to build this company out, and I've been really looking into Shopify. So there's 3 things that I want our site to do. One, it's got to scale beyond just me. I don't want just my artwork. I want to bring other artists into it. So what I like about Shopify, the price is right. I think it's about $30 a month. I'll probably buy my domain, do my hosting through them. But I need a wait list. So this lets me kind of pre-sell or get capture email lists. It has its own email list, and it seems to be pretty robust as far as like what MailChimp does. And it's got its own storefront too. So there's three things in there that probably save me about $100 a month and give me more functionality all on one platform. So right now I'm kind of leaning towards that. I'll let you know if that changes, but that's where I am with that work. All right, let me back up to one other thing, which is pretty interesting. Two parts to this. Back to context, pretty quickly that's the sketchbook, right? Looks like a sketchbook. It is a sketchbook. Shows function there. I've got mugs, and every once in a while, every year or so, someone will buy a mug, right? I'm not getting rich off of mugs, I can tell you that. But that's before I had these, and I have one now. This didn't exist, so this is what's called a mock-up, right? This plugs into Printful, and if you've heard of drop shipping, you've heard of white labeling, terms like that. Printful is a print-on-demand service that I like. I like their products I've received so far, and it's essentially you've got thousands of different types of merchandise items that you can put your artwork on, and people are buying them one at a time. So this is how it works, right? That mug might cost them, I don't know, I'm guessing 25 cents to make, right? They've got huge volume. They've got their vendors who are producing these things for them. They've got overhead. But let's say it costs them 25 cents to make. They would charge me, just a made up number, $7 per mug that I want to make, right? I get to set the price. So my brand, my idea, my artwork, I might mark that coffee mug up to $20. So when an order comes in through my site, there's a plugin that lets that happen. Like it looks like this is exactly what that is on the site here. Someone buys that order, the money comes to me. That order goes directly to Printful. It pays for the $7. I get to keep the difference of $13. They print it, they make it, they ship it, they put my logo on it, not just the cup, but also on the shipping label, and it looks like it's coming from me. That's drop shipping, right? So it's interesting that if you want to make hats or t-shirts or anything else, that's a way to do it. The biggest problem is you have quality assurance issues. Are they good, right? Well, they give you discounts. You can buy them at cost, and you can order your own stuff to kind of have a quality assurance that kind of goes out from time to time. So that's another feature. That's something you can look at. There's best practices in that. There's not so good practices in that. There's things like, say you want to go into the coffee business. There's places that sell coffee, and you can market and brand that coffee bag yourself. So the biggest challenge with that is what? It's the same as everybody else's coffee. There's no distinction. So the only thing you're doing is branding it. So I don't love that. This is different. This is your work. That is kind of the product. Universal t-shirts, kind of a lot of people use the same manufacturers for those types of things. Anyways, a lot of stuff to throw at you all, trying to give you some tools as you start to look at trying to get things out in the market. All these things are viable options. And this is kind of that infrastructure in the back end of how I've cobbled it together over the years. So right now I'm trying to unify that through a singular platform. Again, that's why I'm kind of looking at Shopify. All right. So back to Miro boards, just a point of reference here. That's why I've kind of designed this the way I have, is that's what I want my landing page to look like, more or less. And it's got certain functionality. And I designed that first after making the mistake of trying to go to the software and find that. And now Shopify, again, is the one that seems to be kind of hitting all the marks that I'm looking for. So I went back with clarity, and I cut my research time way, way down. Okay. Does that help you a little bit? Give you some direction? Okay. If you are interested in tabling at the Richmond Tattoo Convention, I saw a show of hands here. We have to figure out what that looks like and how I would kind of vet that process of who's showing and what's being shown. Again, I want it to represent the best of what we have, for sure. And if it ends up that we can't pull that together in time, I'll just say to Jesse, thanks, but no thanks, we'll have to pass. Okay, so we're not obligated to it, but he is going to start blocking out that space for us, or he has blocked out that space for us to use that. All right, other stuff to kind of talk about here. Those are the big things. you all relate to me some of the sticking points that you're having here. As we're if we're looking at this October 31st deadline for the sale or the launch of what you're doing, um, what has you the most anxious, excited, concerned? What are the bottlenecks for you all right now? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you're talking about October 15th, kind of somewhere in there, which was awesome. So is is the game jam part of VCU? Is it something separate? Okay. What do you plan on doing with the project from the game jam? Okay. Is there any commercial component to that, or is it just the point of just kind of making the game? Okay. Okay. Well, there's ways for you all, and I highly encourage just as students that you do this as a professor in other classes and studios and things. In senior portfolio, I'm telling students like if you get a professional job, bring it in, right? So there's going to be something that you have already that you've already made. Remember that I have not put the requirement on you that you have to make a new piece of artwork. So I just showed you drop shipping and other tools that you might look at for actually producing some type of merchandise or artifact or something else. So it doesn't have to be, and I don't think it should be, right? We have to get kind of smarter with how we're approaching the things that we're doing and being more efficient. And that was not a sideways kind of jab at you. Being more efficient with the things that we have and how can we kind of profit off of those, right? Because your future as artists, if you and you're an employee, you might have your side hustle. You might do something that's kind of your safety net. Like you always want to have something kind of going on that you're creatively putting in the world that's not influenced by the corporate job you have or the industrial job or the institutional job or whatever it is, right? So you want to continue making your work. If you are completely freelance, you're kind of building these things up and whenever possible, we want to maximize our efforts. So go back to kind of some of this tech world verbiage that we're using. I think I mentioned this last time, but if you're 2xing something or 10xing something, right? I gave you that example. How do you take something you already have and find a way of kind of benefiting from that, right? Making something new from that or creating something new from that. So I understand limitations of time. I have them too. I'm kind of trying to build this business in parallel while I'm teaching and doing other things. So it's a push, right? It's a challenge. I hope I'm putting some tools in front of you that help shortcut that a little bit so that you're not all having to do all the research on your own. That's what your conversations in Discord can be with your cohorts as well. Like, what are you doing? Like, oh, okay, that's very similar to what I want to do. That's who you should team up with, right? And if something happens with your cohorts where we need to make some pivots and changes and restructure some cohorts so we have some like-minded projects with them, I'm open to that. It might cause some confusion in a big class like this, but putting people together who are actually working on common projects or collaborating is all absolutely justified. All right. So if there's something I can help you with too on that, let me know. Other things that are going on. Great question. So the question was, when it comes to product launch, do you have to have the project finished? No. In fact, going back to that example of Kickstarter, that is that's a pitch for the thing that you want to make. So we can get to a lot of approximations. Like, give you an example here. This is one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about, anyways. So let me. Okay. So option A is you pay out of pocket and you have an overhead and there's a risk. So Kickstarter has mitigated risk, right? That's what that pitch platform does. This was a painting that I made, big painting, 8.5 feet tall. I decided that I wanted to do a screen print of this. I actually ran this as a Kickstarter for the show reveal. One of the rewards was a limited edition print of the big painting, right? This print did not exist when I first displayed this. This is a mock-up. This is what I want to make, right? And at that time, I forget what I think that my prints were, yeah, $55 here for a limited edition print. So option A is I pay out of pocket and I cover 250 prints, and it gets very expensive. We're talking about, in kind of the $10,000 range if I were paying per unit. Probably half that because my cost was much lower. I'm confusing you on that. But what I did instead was I did pre-sales, right? So I went through and said, this is what I want to make. It's going to have embossing. They're going to be signed. You see that this embossing, that emboss is not real. It's a Photoshop filter. I made the mock-up by taking the flat image. I used the perspective tool. I used a Gaussian blur and doubled it and erased it out so it looks like it has depth of field. It's not hard to make a mock-up. In fact, there's tons of free mock-ups out there too that you can use to show your work in context. So what I did is I then went into this, maybe it was a different print, but the same premise. And I went to my email list. I said, hey, I'm going to make this limited edition print. It is going to retail for this price. Let's say that I have $3,000 in overhead that I have to cover. I don't tell the people on my list that, but I say, I'm going to sell 60 of them at $50. So there's incentive because they might be less expensive. But those pre-sales are limited to 60. Why? Because 50 times 60 is 3,000, right? So I get my money from other people pre-buying the work. I pay the vendor with that. So pre-sales that's why people do pre-sales, is to collect, one, test the market, see if people are interested. But there's so many things that I do where we're getting into just the pitch stage, and you're trying to get as close of an approximation as you can to what the final thing might look like. So we're going to get into that starting next week. What do your pitches look like? What forms can they take? What are things that we can do to kind of get people to essentially buy into your vision of what you want to make? Does that make sense? Right. So, you can do a one-off that's so much easier to do these days where you're getting one thing made, it's a sample or something like that. But I highly encourage not spending money and figuring out a way to work with people where they're essentially investing in kind of the thing that you want to make. All right. Other questions on it? Yes. Great question. So what type of work at the tattoo convention and when? I've got to get the dates. I feel like it's that October 19th kind of weekend. Sounds correct to me. What we make is up to us. I would say that you have to look at the customer base of, if you really want to sell something, then you have to kind of go into this and have something that relates to the market. It's pretty wide open the way Jesse has said it. So yes, there is a lot of tattoo artists there, but he's got amazing illustrators and fine artists coming in as well. So he's trying to bring in a wide array of people who want to go to the festival. He's trying to broaden the market. So I really think that we have a lot of options there as to how we want to present ourselves. And we will present ourselves as a group with individuals in the group. Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think probably the best thing is those who decide that, like, I'm available, I would really like to do this. We may actually spin off into another little cohort and have you all communicating together to build those things up. That would be kind of the most efficient use of that. There's 2 tables max, and they're 4 foot by 6 feet. So not a ton of space. He had more, but I was like, I want to put limits on us. 1 table is enough, actually. 2 tables is a little bit overwhelming, right? So I don't know what kind of reception we're going to get or anything else, and we might not have any tables. I don't know. It depends on what kind of comes through. But I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that question of how much space are we going to have, right? Um, when I first started off as a painter, really big galleries intimidated me, right? Like okay, we're going to give you, 2,000 square feet of space or, whatever it is. It's like, I've got to fill those walls. So put me in a box. I started going with smaller galleries and coffee shops for my first shows because like I can allot a certain amount of time. I can fill that space. I can maybe produce a lot of work and then choose my 10 best pieces. So the same curation that you would have in your portfolio. So I think that limit on the number of tables is actually very healthy for us to kind of figure out what's of value that we want to share. And yeah, exactly. So the volume of work and again, back to kind of the gallery example, um, if you've got 2,000 feet of space, like, am I doing 40 paintings? Am I doing 10 really big ones? And again, like just limits. This is a really great question for my point on the importance of limits and creativity. When I start making personal projects, I turn back to those mechanisms from business that put limits on my projects. So I want to do whatever I want. It's like, okay, if I was doing this for somebody else, I'd need a deadline. I need to know what things cost. I need to know how big they are. I need to know kind of who's interested in these things. So I go back to all those tenets that define value in business, and I start to apply those to personal paintings and personal projects and things that I want to draw. So I always go back to that structure because it is the most efficient way of doing it, and it's best practice. So great question. Any other questions? All right. Y'all enjoying the guest speakers coming in? Yeah, we got a great one next week. I think Kyle Webster is coming in next week. So if you know Kyle, Kyle is, and I hope I'm not putting this out of sequence, but uh, Kyle and I go way back. But Kyle is, he just announced the release of 150 new brushes on Procreate. Is that Kyle? That Kyle? Yeah, first Kyle. Yeah, and so we're going to talk to him about how did he build his brush kingdom, right? I got to see it kind of from the beginning, and I'll give all that backstory. But he is an awesome guy, just really bright and full of life, and um, he's worked from being a designer first. He became a very successful illustrator. I'm giving you all the kind of the lead into the story next week, but I want you to look him up a little bit to have some questions ready for him, and I want him to talk to you all about how did he go from selling brushes on, of all places, Gumroad, right, to selling, having his entire business kind of bought out by Adobe, where he got hired and then ultimately to Procreate. It's a really cool story. And he didn't know how to do any of it. All right. So that's coming next week. And what I want to spend our time doing for the next however long it takes, we have a little over an hour. Let's take 10 minutes. We'll grab a break. And then I want you to meet with your cohorts and make some progress. I will try to bounce around as much as I can to kind of get updates on projects and everything else. But um, I've had some groups. You can welcome to meet wherever you want. That space gets really loud. This space is going to get pretty loud if we have too many groups. So you can split your cohorts if you want. If you want to talk to me, I'd say stay in one of those two spaces. But if you don't need to talk to me and you want to go grab a cup of coffee and work through your cohorts, we're not going to meet back here for any reason. So you can go where you can be most productive. Okay. Before we depart, kind of into the cohorts here, um, time restrictions, other studios or studio classes, I get it. I'm trying to do something kind of different and novel with you all here. But if there's anything else you want me to bring in, if there's anything else you want me to touch on, I'm happy to do it. Just talk to me and I'll try to keep information coming. Okay. Thank you all.